What's up, Spartan Warriors? Welcome to episode 10 of the Spartan Underground podcast. This episode features somebody I consider to be a pioneer in the area of jiu-jitsu instructional information, my good friend, Mr. Stephan Kesting. Stefan created a lot of the first instructional DVDs, the first quality instructional DVDs that I had ever purchased and learned from. So I was really excited to have him as a guest on the show. As always, we need to take a moment to talk about our sponsors. The featured sponsor for this episode is Impact Custom Mouth Guards, simply the best jiu-jitsu, MMA, and boxing mouth guards on the market, completely custom. They send out a kit. You do the mold of your teeth. It's super simple. Send it back to them and get your custom mouth guard shortly after. So make sure you check them out on impactmouthguards.com and use the code Spartan and then the number 10 to receive 10% off of your order. We also have to talk about our good friends over at Show You Roll. Show You Roll sponsors every episode of the Spartan Underground. Check them out on showyouroll.com. That's www.shoyorol.com. Simply the best jiu-jitsu uniforms on the market. Also sponsored by our great friends at Albino and Preto, who make awesome jiu-jitsu apparel and also are in the market of jiu-jitsu uniforms. They are one of Show You Roll's sister brands. Awesome gear. Make sure you check them out at www.albinoandpreto.com. Again, www.albinoandpreto.com. And without any further delay, here's the show. What's up, Spartan Warriors? We're here for episode 10 of the Spartan Underground podcast. I am really excited about this episode. This is somebody I've wanted to have on for a very long time. Somebody I feel is one of the pioneer in jiu-jitsu instructional information. I have my good friend Stephan Kesting on with us tonight. How you doing tonight, Stephan?
I'm doing great, James. How about you?
Oh, man. I just took my ibuprofen, just had a good training.
The vitamin.
Yeah, the grapplers pre-workout and post-workout. Had a great training session today, getting ready for my super fight over in Spokane next weekend. So definitely in that stage feeling banged up. But what have you been up to lately?
Well, I survived Hawaii. I went to Hawaii for Christmas, and there's lots of jiu-jitsu there, or there is jiu-jitsu there, right? And got there, and I was absolutely sick as a dog, and everybody who's traveling with us was sick as a dog, so there was absolutely no jiu-jitsu in Hawaii for me.
Oh, man. That actually, the one time my wife went to Hawaii with her family, the same thing happened to her. She was sick and miserable the entire time they were there. I think it might have something to do with that long flight or something.
Well, I think we were all on the downhill slope before getting there.
Right.
I can't blame the flight. I'm sure it didn't help. But yeah, it's disappointing because I've been looking forward to doing that, and not to mention that there's some just looking at the map, there's some amazing hiking there. So it would have been a nice combination of two of my passions, which is the jiu-jitsu and the outdoor stuff. But whatever, if you got to be sick, you might as well be sitting on a beach.
Exactly. And now you'll have an excuse to go back, right? You go and do all the things that you missed out on doing while you were sick.
Well, no matter where you go, you're always going to miss out on something. So,
very true.
To all you Hawaiians there, you do live in paradise. So I'll come back and bug you another time.
Yeah, they certainly do. I actually have some relatives over there, but I've never been over there, so I need to make my way over there. Hopefully, I don't get sick though. Now, for some of the people listening who may not know a whole lot about you, why don't you tell them a little bit about how you got into jiu-jitsu and how you got started working on grapplearts.com and all your instructional DVDs and things that you put out. How did you get involved with that? Around what time did you get started in your jiu-jitsu journey?
Well, I guess inadvertently, it was wanting to be a ninja at about age 8.
Nice.
And working on my mom, and since there was no, since all the ninjutsu schools in my hometown were invisible or not not findable, I was gonna have to settle for something like jiu-jitsu.
Man, that's the way. That's the way of the ninja, though. They're supposed to be invisible, right?
Yeah, there's that awesome video out there. Like, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's something about the Ninja Parade. People going to watch the Ninja Parade, and it's the 20th annual anniversary. Yeah. And once again, the ninjas are not spotted at the Ninja Parade.
I remember seeing that one too. That was hilarious.
Yeah, so my mom wasn't so hot on the idea of her kid waving swords around and climbing trees with claws. For some reason I still can't understand.
Yeah.
And so the best I could get was judo. It took 4 years of lobbying to start with judo. And so arguably judo jiu-jitsu, I mean they're very related arts, was my first martial art.
Definitely.
And then when I got older and had more autonomy, I went off the path and went down the kung fu rabbit hole and some other rabbit holes, but then kept on coming back to some form of grappling. And I think it was the Gracie in Action videos, the old VHS cassette tapes.
Right, I remember those.
That was sort of the wake up call, like, hey, there's something happening here, and this is it's undeniable that if you're interested in self-defense, and ultimately, I don't think of myself as a grappler, first and foremost. I think of myself as a martial artist.
Right.
First, I mean, jiu-jitsu is my favorite martial art, but there's a difference between sort of being a grappler and being a martial artist, I think. So as a martial artist, it was like, okay, there's something undeniable here that we need to take account of. And we started just at the end of Kachikembo class at Philip Gelina's Academy in Montreal. He was gracious enough to allow us use of the mat space to roll around, and at that time we were pulling hair, we were bending fingers, we were trying to put each other thumbs in each other's eyes.
Fish,
so good fun.
Good old fish hooking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, old school.
Well, basically the list of things that you weren't allowed to do in the first UFC we were doing. That was long before the first UFC.
Yeah, I remember those days because that was kind of how our grappling was in the style of karate I did. There was a lot of the stuff that we're not allowed to do in jiu-jitsu, pretending like you're pulling ears off and fish hooking and grabbing hair and all that good stuff.
But any time spent on the ground, any time spent rolling around, whether you're going for the fish hook or you're going for the Ezekiel choke, it's a totally legal choke, doesn't matter. You're still spending time on the ground. You're still basically trying to control somebody's body. You're dealing with weight and momentum and leverage, and so it was still useful, even though we didn't really have a clue of what we were doing. So I look back on those times fondly, and I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, definitely. You can always glean a lot of good information if you're open to receiving it, right? Like you can look how to apply your lessons from the other traditional martial arts and carry those over into your jiu-jitsu training if you're open and minded enough to be able to do that.
Well, and nowadays, somebody in the same position, good Lord, the question is not, okay, back then, information was the choke point. It was the rate limiting step. There was nobody out there showing you how to, get from the guard to the mount, and from the mount to the armbar. You could kind of, sort of, maybe reconstruct it if you had a little bit of judo background and a little bit of traditional jiu-jitsu background, and you watched frame by frame, the Gracie in Action tapes, frame by frame. But now it's almost the other problem. There's so much information out there that, you could train, in theory, you could never enter a jiu-jitsu school and get to a pretty decent level just training with your buddies. I mean, it's pretty likely you're going to go down some major rabbit holes, and ideally you are going to some jiu-jitsu school at least once in a while to calibrate yourself against reality. But in theory, there's no shortage. Well, there is no shortage of information. What's missing is the feedback or the context. Just because somebody's got this crazy ass helicopter toe hold, upside down, inverted De La Riva Berimbolo to toe hold thing doesn't mean that it's a good technique. But they did put it on YouTube, so now it's yours.
Yeah, take it for what it's worth, right? Yeah, I agree. We ran into the same problem back when I was starting. It was just a lack of information. I remember trying to take somebody got a hold of some bootleg VHS tapes of the UFC that they made, and we would try to reverse engineer what Royce was doing. Try to learn how to do the arm bar and the chokes and all the different things that we saw him doing in there. And then I remember there was one book on jiu-jitsu, and on the cover, I'll never forget, it was kind of like this Italian guy in a tank top with a big gold chain. And it was like, you probably saw it because it was one of the only ones back then, and that was like a grappling or jiu-jitsu book back in the day. So it's really amazing how far things have come. We have the opposite problem. We have information overload now.
Well, I think it's a better problem to have.
Oh, most definitely.
But I remember there was this one guy. So there were a bunch of us. We fast forward. We moved from Montreal, or I moved from Montreal to Vancouver. Now there was another group of us, and we were all training in different martial arts. I was doing mostly judo at the time. I was doing judo and I was doing Wing Chun. And so with the judo, I had a fair bit of grappling in there. That's the area of judo that I specialized in for sure. But the rules of judo grappling and the rules of jiu-jitsu grappling are different. So we would, once a week, a big group of us would get together and we would train. And there was one guy there who was quite a bit better off than the rest of us. And he'd gone and bought, I want to say, the Pedro Carvalho tape. I think that's what they were. Anyhow, they were super expensive.
Yeah, and it was like a big, 12 or 15 VHS tape set, I think.
Exactly. And I want to say $300 or $400. I might be making that up. Anyhow, he'd come and he'd show one technique from one of the tapes. And no matter how much you begged him, he wouldn't show you a second technique. He wouldn't let the tapes out of his sight.
Wouldn't let that information free.
No. I guess it kept him at the top of the information pile. I mean, he
for sure.
Actually wasn't that tough to kick his ass, but we didn't know what we were doing.
We won't let him know that unless he's listening.
It's funny, but I think there was something I read that was in a world of infinite content. Context is king, right? So we're switching from where there's a paucity of content to the requirement for context, and that's, I think, where you as an instructor, you must run into that all the time, right? Guys come to class and trying some crazy ass combination that doesn't fit in at all with the rest of their game, or is just a stupid technique, or isn't legal,
right?
Or you gotta spend a certain amount of time firefighting.
Yep, it does happen for sure. How would you recommend, with the vastness of, the vast amount of information that's available out there, if you were to speak to a person that was wanting to go out and, supplement their training with some online instruction, is there a specific approach they should take, like narrowing their focus down to a certain area, or being aware of the source of where the information's coming from? Do you think they should just dive in there head first, or should they kind of have a little bit of a path laid out for them?
Well, I mean, ultimately, most of jiu-jitsu is for fun. So if they I used to have a much stricter approach to this, and no, you should, focus your training. And if you want to get good fast, then you should focus your training. But if you are the type of person who really, 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 one of these inveterate technique collectors, and you want to know all 35 variations of the berimbolo, and that's what turns your crank, and you're still a blue belt, and you can't actually berimbolo anybody who's very good, but you just enjoy it, man, who am I to argue? Like, if you won't get good as fast, so I think we have to sort of maybe constrain the answer by saying, what's your primary goal here? Is it to get good fast? I think that would help refine the answer. So assuming the person's goal is to get good fast, and assuming if they're a rank beginner, then sure, I mean, they can go and watch techniques and stuff, but at that point, their main goal is to just get a couple of moves that work for them from every one of the major positions.
Yeah, so couple of moves and the ability to survive in the beginning.
Yeah. Hopefully their instructor's giving that to them, but there are a lot of people out there with instructors who are too busy with too many students, instructors who don't care, instructors who only enjoy showing super complicated, fancy stuff, and
right.
As a result never teach the basics, or people without instructors, or people who can only go to a school once a month and the rest of the time they're training in their basement. So in those cases, the rank beginner should use the internet, but they probably shouldn't be using inverting escapes from side mount. They should be working on their bridge and hip escape, that, or their bridge, hip escape, and turn into a single leg. Those things are tried and true, and there's a reason for them being tried and true. And once you've got those mastered, then you can start working on your inverting escapes.
But ultimately, like you said, it comes back to keeping it fun. Training in jiu-jitsu should be fun. That's why you should be coming back. And if you're serious, you want to be a world-class competitor and all these other things, narrow the focus a little more, but make sure you have strong fundamentals, and also allow yourself to have fun and go out there and see all the different things that people are coming up with, because there's definitely no shortage of that.
Well, it's a little bit, you have to go to both ends of the distribution. If you're trying to specialize in, the last move that I did, or the last position that I did a deep dive into, was the single leg X guard.
Right.
It's something I really liked. It fit really well with the X guard. It fit really well with the butterfly guard. It fit really good with the instep or shin guard. So it was the next logical thing for me to focus on. I had, I used it, but I hadn't done a deep dive. So I'll say that roughly half, I'm making this number up, but maybe about half of my time researching and watching competitors use that position or transition into that position or get out of that position was spent on the single leg X guard. And then the other half was just more pleasure, like pleasure reading for pleasure, or and I think there's a value there too, because if there's some area of jiu-jitsu that's developing that you have no awareness of, that can really come and bite you in the ass. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the whole worm guard thing myself yet. I don't use it much, but I better know what it is. At the very least, I better recognize it when somebody starts trying to feed my lapel 3 times around my leg and then around my wrist and then tie in a bowline or whatever.
Yeah, and from the perspective of somebody who's an instructor, even if we don't want to necessarily add that element to our game, we need to be able to show our students the basic concept and understand how to, like you said, learn how to avoid it if possible and recognize the warning signs and all those things. So if we're closed off to information, it can really be a hindrance.
I agree 100%. Also, the best way to learn to defend against something is to learn to do it yourself. And that comes from Eric Paulson. I mean, he's known as a leg lock guy, although he's got an array of skills that go way beyond leg locking. And initially, when he was taught leg locks, because he was going to be going to fight in Japan, where there was a preponderance of leg locks. So okay, in order to be able to defend against these leg locks, you need to learn them so you can recognize what's happening. And also, if you know how to apply, say, an armbar. Okay, so to do an armbar properly, your hips should be close to my shoulder. Your legs shouldn't be splayed completely apart. And my thumb should either be pointing straight up or to the downhill side. So that right away, if those 3 things are true, that gives me 3 ways to escape from the armbar. One is to get my shoulder away from your hips and because then denying you the leverage. And then if I go through each of the other key points, if I twist my hand the other way, then it's much harder for you to apply the armbar. And if I can spread your legs, that was the second point, right? If I can make you do the splits,
right,
then I'm undoing the effectiveness of the armbar to some extent, and maybe I can find a way out. So if you know how to put a technique on really well, sometimes you can reverse engineer escaping from it just by denying the people the key points.
For sure. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Understanding the move is a huge part about understanding how to counter.
So what's the last area of jiu-jitsu that you've been working on, James? For your own game.
Let's see, for my game.
Or do you not want to just release this after your super
No. No, I adapt to the situation, so I'm not worried about going to a specific place. But I actually have been having a lot of fun. I don't know if you've heard of it. There's a type of guard that the guy calls Kuru guard, and he's one of Saulo Barros' guys over in Brazil, a smaller guy. And it's kind of like a single leg X kind of position with the overhooking the leg, wrapping the leg, but putting the foot in a different position. So I've been playing a lot with that probably for the past 5 or 6 years, just, really going into the position from every possible situation and trying to control it and understand all the different ways to get there and all the common reactions that people give. And so I've been having a lot of fun with that. I've been stubborn with my approach on that. I've been practicing it for a long time. I haven't even broke it out in competition yet. Maybe next weekend will be a good time to do that. I don't know.
It's funny. I saw Bernardo Faria teach a seminar. At the end, he rolled with everybody and he tapped every single person with an omoplata.
Yeah.
In competition, I think he's finished one guy with an omoplata. So sometimes there's these parallel tracks of what people are training on, and I guess to have as an ace up their sleeve if everything else goes to hell.
Yeah, exactly. Usually you see him go to deep half and hit his deep half sweep and come up top and hit his over-under pass, and don't see him with people in his guard a whole lot hitting that omoplata.
Yeah, it's a great example of game plan design, which is another thing I suppose that your instructor can help you pick out techniques that are more applicable to your game, but hopefully a good instructor is also helping you put those techniques together into sort of an effective game plan where your guard sweep works together with your guard pass at the most simplistic level.
Yeah, and playing to whatever is beneficial for your attributes too. I think a good instructor will kind of direct you in the way to play to your strengths.
I find that so funny coming from you. You just been talking about working a small guy guard for the last 5 years. You're bloody gigantic. But the last time I saw you, you were busy inverting another quote small guy maneuver.
Hey, I identify as a little guy. I'm a big guy or little guy trapped in a big guy's body, right?
Well, I suppose if it keeps it better than the other way.
Hey, my A game is always going to be on top. So, what's it hurt to go and build my overall knowledge of jiu-jitsu and work from my back, because I can always come back to the top game. It's always going to be there. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I've always approached it. My one of my first instructors was a very small guy. He's about 5'4", 5'5", and back then he was like 145 pounds. And he just told me, he said, James, you have to start every round with the person in your guard, and the only way you're allowed to be on top is if you get a sweep. So I played off my back for many, many years, and the way he explained it was similar to what I was just saying about, you're always going to be more naturally prone to being good from the top because of your size and everything. So what's it hurt to work from your back for a while and get a complete game there?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a problem there, I think, with some people, because if they're the smallest guy in the class, they're going to end up spending a ton of time in the guard and on the
Right.
bottom. And they're going to develop a really killer guard game. And if you're the biggest guy in the class, as you point out, there's always a tendency that you're going to be the smash and grind guy
Right.
from the top. But if you actually go compete, the little guy is going to be mostly competing against other little guys.
Yes,
And the big guy's going to...
Yeah, from a competition perspective, that definitely plays a big factor.
Yeah, so then I would definitely say it's rare to find big guys with effective guards. And it's slightly rare to find little guys who are better at the top game than they are at the bottom game.
Yeah, so kind of rare to see the little rooster weights smashing their way through, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually more of a double guard pull kind of situation and see who gets the sweep or gets to the back.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Those double guard pull situations, they're technically interesting, and I think you should train them. But I don't know. At that point, the Carlson Gracie lineage in me just bubbles up. And like, somebody stand up, damn it!
Yeah.
Just crush the other guy.
Yeah, I feel the same way when I see that. I call it stripper pole guard. Trying to rotate around the stripper pole.
Yeah. But any sport you have and any set of rules that you have, people are going to do their very, very best to game it. Nobody wants to lose, right? So
oh yeah, definitely. It exists. It exists everywhere.
So I mean, it's yet another. Although the double guard pull Berimbolo thing seems to have stuck around for a fair amount of time. I mean, I thought 50-50 was the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it does not seem to have negatively. It doesn't seem to have had as long a residence time. It hasn't stuck around for as long as I thought it was going to.
Yeah, I've noticed a little trend recently of a little less Berimbolo and more guys getting into single leg X. That kind of seems like one of the things I see a lot more people going to in competition now.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we're in a trend for change, but with jiu-jitsu, it's kind of a retro thing. Probably 2 or 3 years from now, it's going to be back to regular De La Hiva or some other position that people forget about
or there's this amazing position I've heard about, this amazing guard position where if you're on your knees and I'm on my back, I take both my legs and I put them around your waist and I cross my ankles behind your back.
Holy cow.
It's radical.
What would somebody call that? Like maybe a closed type of guard or something?
Yeah, I think closed guard for for brevity. For
a lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is it's a paper scissors stone situation, right? If you spend all your time becoming super good at Berimbolo and countering Berimbolo and knowing every aspect of that game, and then somebody comes and puts you in a different position that you just haven't spent as much time in, then now you've got to, and maybe you have a tough time, now you got to go readjust. In order for you to change your game, there's an opportunity cost because you've got to go and spend time training something that's not your main game.
Right.
And really the best competitors have this uncanny ability to force people to play their game, which is amazing.
Yeah, they can direct them into their strong position from almost everywhere.
Yeah, I guess Amanda Nunes and Ronda Rousey is a good example of that.
Oh, for sure.
Kept Rousey in the striking range, and I think Rousey tried to clinch one time, if I remember correctly.
She tried twice, and Amanda just kind of took an angle and pushed her off both times. But yeah, I think I agree from the technical aspect on that one. I also think the mental game was a huge factor in that one. I just don't think she was there. I think that other loss took a lot out of her, and she had said some things in her interview on Ellen several months before that kind of were the telltale signs of things you shouldn't say if you're if you're aware of mental training in the mental game, she was kind of giving some signs that her heart wasn't really into it anymore.
Were those the thoughts of suicide after losing?
No, she was actually talking about anytime you see somebody talking about that they're planning to quit before they've even gone in and completed their upcoming fight, that's usually not a good sign. She was already
okay.
She was already.
I did not see this interview. I just saw the headlines from it.
Yeah, so she was already saying like, yeah, this will probably be my last, or I might do one or two more fights, kind of thing, and just her mannerisms and posture. She kept looking down a lot when she was giving the answers. She looked like she had a total lack of confidence going into it. So it was actually I'd never been a fan of hers, but it was actually really sad to see. I didn't want to see somebody go out that way,
Well, there are very, very few MMA fighters who go out on a high note. I mean,
yeah,
it's. I think the money is a big lure, and I've known fighters who, how else are they going to make 20 grand in a couple of months?
Yeah, right? or 24 grand a second, like Ronda made. I think they said she made $3 million on that fight. So somebody broke it down, and it was like 24 or 25,000 a second that she was in the ring. I mean, that's astronomical. So,
well, what I try and tell fighters who are trying to decide whether they should quit, and they never listen.
No, well, that's one of the things that goes hand in hand with training fighters.
I guess you want somebody who's super stubborn and does not give up.
Exactly.
And has strong mental toughness, but unfortunately that can translate to a lack of coachability as well. They've got to think about legacy. So Ronda Rousey made, was it $3 million for that fight? But how many millions of dollars of movie roles did she leave on the table?
Yeah.
By screwing that up. Similarly, say you got some, B fighter who's not fighting the UFC, he's fighting in other promotions, but he ends his career on, 5 losses or something. Well, if his big life plan is to open a school, potential students are going to know that this guy, went out on a downhill trajectory.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tough legacy to exit the sport with.
Yeah, it's tough for people that have that kind of spirit that want to keep getting in there. It can be hard for them to, make the decision to quit at the right time. They just, especially the people that start losing and then they keep trying to go back and rekindle that win streak that they used to have, and it just, a lot of times you don't see it work out the way that they would like it to.
Well, one thing I've seen a lot of is they still have the desire to win, but they start losing the desire to prepare to win.
Right.
I mean, that's not always true. Some people are just in there grinding in the gym day after day after day. But at a certain point, one guy I knew summed it up like, man, when I started training for MMA, I just wanted to train every day. I wanted to train 3 times a day. And now I just don't ever want to train. And like when I've got a fight coming up, I'm like, oh, shit, 6 weeks of, I guess I better get started. And well, that's just not a good sign. Like, oh, I guess I better get started.
Well, and I think you would agree, being someone that's been around it a long time. I mean, MMA training is there's not a lot of longevity in MMA training as a full-time thing. I mean, your body can only take that kind of abuse for so many years. I mean, they have so many injuries and are so banged up. A lot of people don't realize pretty much none of those people are 100% going into those fights. They're all going in there with nagging injuries and things that happen during camp and everything else. So
people are so sure, the guys on the couch are so sure that they know why the guy lost. Oh, look at that idiot. He was keeping his hands down. You never keep your hands down in a fight. Well, who knows? Maybe his rotator cuff was hanging together with 2 little muscle fibers, but he agreed to fight and didn't want to pull out of it. I mean, I've known boxers who fought with broken hands.
Oh yeah.
They're supposed to catch all that stuff in the pre-fight workups, but if they can hide it, they do.
And they usually do hide it.
Yeah. Or they go in there completely sick.
Yep, I've seen that. Fighting with staff and everything else. Yeah, it's scary stuff, but you know, it's a hard career, and it can be hard to know when to hang it up, for sure. Especially when you love it.
I always thought it'd be interesting that when they have those weigh-in statistics right before the fighters fight, and they show the height, they show the age, they show their record, they show their reach. If they could have a separate thing of, and you'd never get this information, of all the medical problems that they're currently dealing with, that would, you know, I'm sure the odds makers in Vegas would like to get their hands on that information as well.
Yeah, for sure, and not to mention the damage they do to themselves with the extreme weight cutting that a lot of them participate in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see some of those people go in there looking like zombies, and your body can only bounce back from that so many times, and then you see these guys like, what's his name, Johnny Hendricks, who's missed weight now 2 or 3 times in a row, to where their body just won't let go of that weight anymore. They can't handle the cuts, especially with the UFC not allowing them to do the IVs after weighing in and all of that. It's kind of thrown a monkey wrench in there.
Well, I have it on good authority that back in the day, they weren't only just putting IV, like you'd weigh in close to death, you'd slam an IV in your arm, but that IV would have a whole bunch of good drugs in it too.
Yeah.
And that was stuff that would be picked up now by the USADA testing, hopefully.
Yeah, and that was the other reason why they did that, was because they were saying, hey, they're not just hydrating, they're putting a lot of other stuff in there as well. So
they're diluting.
Yes, exactly, cleaning out the system. So something I wanted to touch on, I mentioned during the intro that I consider you a pioneer in instructional DVD market and online instruction. I mean, I remember that I want to say your DVDs and maybe some of Keith Owen's DVDs were some of the first DVDs that I started regularly purchasing and checking out. You know, what was your thinking or reasoning for wanting to delve into that market?
Well, I gotta once again thank Eric Paulson, because I got my hands on one of those ancient VHS recorders. So these were a video camera where you'd literally slap a VHS tape onto the side of it.
Yep, I remember those. My parents would rent those from back when we used to have video stores where you could go rent videos. The local one had where you could rent the giant VHS cameras like that.
So I had one of those, and I'd been thinking, I think it was a systematic approach to attacking the turtle, right? You know, first you try this, then you try that, then you try this other thing, then you try this other thing. And so we filmed it in a buddy of mine's rec room in his apartment complex. We filmed it, and I was pretty happy with it. And I made some VHS tape copies, and I sent them off to a friend of mine who was living, you know, a couple hundred miles away. And I was like, oh, what the hell? I'll send one to Eric Paulson, who I knew, and I sent it to a couple other people, you know, my instructor back home. Like, hey, what do you think of this? This, you know, pretty cool technology, this VHS tape thing. And Eric got back to me and said, hey, you should try selling that. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. You know, I'm just a purple belt. Who'd ever buy something from a purple belt? And he gave me examples of a couple other purple belts and brown belts who were selling stuff.
Right. He
goes, well, and you're a really good teacher. And so, you know, and you're one of my instructors, so go ahead and sell it. And so I didn't sell that, but it kind of opened the doors to, well, maybe there is a way to disseminate information. And that was back in the day when the standard thing to do, if you won a UFC, I remember Don Fry won a UFC.
Oh yeah, they were in the tapes were all in the back of the Black Belt
exactly.
Black Belt magazine.
Yeah, Yeah, and they would include things like, Don Fry's killer punching combinations, which is valid because the guy was a wicked puncher. Don Fry's takedowns and throws, which is valid because Don Fry was a good wrestler. Don Fry's submissions from the guard, which was a complete crock of crap because
Yeah.
Don Fry didn't know the guard from, I don't know, the turtle position.
Right.
And it was obvious when he ended up on his back that he had no clue of what he was doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one thing I promised myself was I wouldn't make tapes or DVDs or apps or instructionals, we'll call them instructionals, about a topic that I didn't feel fairly confident in myself. Like that would be my distinguishing thing. I wouldn't make as many of them. It wouldn't be as long. I wouldn't be able to do the 12 to 15 set VHS tape set like what you talked about, but at least not at that time. But I would constrain myself to talking about what I enjoyed or what I was, what I'd been researching essentially and what I'd been using in my own game. And I put it out there, and the response was pretty good. People liked it, and despite the fact that I think at the time I was very, I wasn't as comfortable on camera then as I am now. I think spending hundreds, if not thousands, of hours in front of a camera since then have helped.
Yeah, it's just, a little bit. Yeah, it's just that putting in those hours and getting that experience, just like jiu-jitsu training.
Yeah, I probably got, I don't know, 10,000 hours, but something close to it. If you count all the time, well, I mean, I edited my videos back in the day, like the Omoplata video.
Oh yeah, I've got that one sitting about. It's over here on my DVD rack, about 2 feet away from me right now.
Oh, that's funny. That thing took it took 2 days to film, and it took probably 500 hours of me sitting in front of the computer trying to edit it and trying to figure out video editing software.
What software were you using back then?
That was Adobe Premiere on a custom-made PC that a friend of mine had cobbled together as the perfect machine for video editing. So I think he didn't know what the hell he was doing. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I think we ended up in there with 2 video cards that were conflicting. I mean, this is still technobabble that I don't get. You're good at that stuff.
I get it. You're speaking my language.
Okay. But I think 2 video cards that are conflicting is a bad thing when you're video editing.
That is, yeah.
So, and then I remember putting in 300 or 400 hours editing the next one. I think it might have, or one of the future ones, might have been the butterfly guard one.
Yeah,
editing it. Yeah. And then going, the video quality here sucks. I've got to refilm it and throw out all the editing. And so yeah, if you count all the editing, staring at video and listening to myself yabble on endlessly, then I got my 10,000 hours a couple times over, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've always enjoyed about your instructionals is how you kind of chain things together and explain things in a sequence that's easy to understand. I always found, and I still find today, that a lot of instructionals that come out just kind of jump all over the place, and it can kind of be hard to find the underlying thread that they're getting at. So I really like your approach on that. Was that just something that you did naturally, or was it your intention going into it to structure the instruction in that way?
Oh man, I'm half German, so half of me is just the lack of organization in a teaching system drives me crazy.
Right.
It's just but okay, this may sound like a non sequitur. Winston Churchill once wrote a book. It was about the history of the English-speaking peoples, right? So the history of the British Isles and then a little bit of the history of America. And his critics said it should have been called A History of the Things That I, Winston Churchill, Am Interested in. Because it just jumped around and covered episodes in history that he thought was interesting. And I think a lot of people make instructionals like that. Their instructionals should be called A Bunch of Cool Things That I Like to Do from the Guard.
Yeah.
Or A Bunch of Unconnected Ways I Like to Submit People from the Top. And there's some value there, but there's way more value in a system. It's much more important to know how to hook things together and tie them together and to know, okay, here's what my decision-making process is. When I'm faced with a guy who's on his back, and both of his hands are up like this, protecting his face. How do I attack him? What's the first thing I do? What's the second thing I do? Or if it's a instructional on the Kimura, which I haven't done, but if I did one on the Kimura, it would be all the ways to get into the Kimura, despite all the different kinds of resistance, how to hold the Kimura, and then how to finish the Kimura against all different kinds of resistance. So it's many ways into the same position, many ways out of the same position, and to some extent, the ways in and the ways out are determined by what your opponent gives you, because he can't shut down everything all at once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I find that a lot of times with instructionals or when people are learning a technique, they're so focused on the end result that they miss the little nuances that you need to be familiar with, as far as, like you said, getting in the entrance into the position is important. The control of the position is important. And then if you've done all those things correctly, hopefully you'll be able to apply the finish.
Well, we've talked about single leg X guard a couple of times. The breakthrough for me for the single leg X guard was basically realizing that the core thing is how to off balance the guy when you're in the single leg X guard.
Right.
If you can't off balance the guy when he's standing there, then he's going to be able to peel your feet out of position. He's going to be able to stuff your knee. He's going to be able to come over in a half guard or mount or back step, or only bad things will happen to you if you can't keep him on the run.
Exactly.
So, and it's very similar to the X guard, right? If I get the X guard on you and just do not move, and I'm a statue there, you'll figure out a way how to knock my feet out of place and pass. So the whole, in a way that maybe the closed guard, you can get away with some positions a little bit more, but with open guard positions, a lot of the process of maintaining it, ironically, is the process of moving around and keeping your opponent moving around and off balance. So once, I didn't know if I was going to, how deep I was going to go with a single leg X until it all clicked for me. That was my clicking point. I guess different submissions and different techniques have points at which they click. I mean, what's been something for you that's just all of a sudden clicked and started working? And do you remember what it was that made it all, like an entire game or an entire position, finally make sense?
For me, setting up the paper cutter or bread cutter choke, the entrance into it, and the control of the position, it was a big one for me. Not allowing people to retract their bottom shoulder and get to their side to turn in. That was a big breakthrough on that one, in discovering all the different ways that I could accomplish that same thing once I realized that was the key to the position.
And if you were showing that to me, and there was somebody who had no experience with jiu-jitsu sitting and watching, they would just be shaking their head. Yes, I can move my hand here and that blocks being
exactly.
able to turn. Or I can shift my weight ever so slightly this way, in a way that only a jiu-jitsu guy would notice.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny, the attention to detail. I remember watching the UFC in the early days when there was no understanding of groundwork at all, except for the jiu-jitsu guys who were watching.
Yeah.
And there'd be a bunch of drunk, the trailer park crowd would come down, the jiu-jitsu guys would come down, and the only place in town showing it was a strip club. So we'd all be in the strip club. And there'd be somebody pounding on somebody on the bottom, and finally the guy on the bottom would manage to get the guard back, and his knee would pop out at the other side of the person's body. All the jiu-jitsu guys would go nuts.
Yep.
And all the trailer park guys would look in confusion.
Stand him up. Why doesn't he get up?
Yeah. You should just get up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Knock him out.
oh, damn. Finally, I've got the part of the plan that I've been missing.
Yeah.
If only I'd realized that knocking him out was an option.
Yeah, it's so easy. Why don't you just do that?
Yeah.
You put out a lot of content. I've seen you, it seems like you're always putting something out or doing something new. How do you stay so productive? And how do you stay motivated? I know those are like trick questions, but I admire how much work you put in the frequency in which you put out your instructionals online. You know, a lot of people probably don't realize you do the DVDs, you do the YouTube stuff, you have your own podcast as well. So how do you prioritize and make time for all of that?
Well, people talk about, sacrifice. Oh, you got to sacrifice to be a champion. Well, what does sacrifice mean? Sacrifice means not doing something.
Right.
So I think a lot of it is, the things I don't do. Right. I mean, I don't go drinking. I don't have a TV. I haven't had a TV. I don't have Netflix. I don't watch Netflix. My one escape is going to see the occasional movie in the theater. It's such a busy life that I really like, once a month, every couple of months, going to the theater, turn off my phone, and sitting in blackness and just having an immersive experience. But other than that, I'm either doing jiu-jitsu or working on jiu-jitsu stuff, right?
So it would be safe to say that you've made it a priority.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are things that I'm sacrificing. What gets weird is when you're, working on some big jiu-jitsu instructional project and you find it cutting into your jiu-jitsu time.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, but the bottom line is nobody gets to train as much as they want, right? Even the guy who's out there training 3 times a day, 6 days a week, and he's 22 years old, he doesn't think that he's training enough. He might be limited by the fact that he needs to, work a job or, sell drugs or whatever, however he supports his jiu-jitsu habit.
Right.
Or just his body starts breaking down. But, nobody thinks that they're training enough. And so, and also this sport, this game, it's a marathon, right? Like honestly, if you get, I have kids. There have been times that I've been super crazy busy with my kids, right? On top of all that other stuff, I was homeschooling them for years.
Yeah.
And, that is not, when you're working a couple of jobs and homeschooling your kids, something's got to go.
Yeah.
So if during that time, you're just not going to be putting in the same number of hours on the mat as you did when you were younger. And that's just a fact of life. And sport will be there for you when you get back. I speak from experience here. And I'm finally able to pick up my training a little bit, having moved through that phase. And it's a wonderful feeling. And guess what? The sport's still here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, jiu-jitsu will always be there for us when we're ready to come back.
Yeah.
But
and if you can do something to keep it alive in the meantime, you don't, I think, succumbing to binary thinking. Either I'm training 5 days a week or screw it, I'm not training at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a couple people like that. It's kind of that all or nothing mentality.
I think part of the problem is, say you're training 5 days a week and you're competitive with a bunch of guys, and now you go to a maintenance schedule, right? 2 times a week. That's all you can do for whatever reason, right? Your probation officer only lets you go to jiu-jitsu twice a week. And the people that you used to hang with keep getting better, and you're getting better, but not as fast. And they start kicking your ass. And I think a lot of people find that really difficult to deal with.
Yep.
As opposed to saying, no. What this proves is that jiu-jitsu works.
Right.
If you train more, you will get better faster, and you'll be able to kick the ass of people who don't train as often.
Exactly.
So what are you expecting? Some is better than none, always. Some is better than none. So if you can only train once a week, train only once a week. It'll keep, your neurology a little bit jiu-jitsu oriented, then try and do as much as you can on the side by watching video or thinking about it, or not becoming a big fat slob, not overeating, not trying to replace your jiu-jitsu with alcohol.
Right.
And it'll be there for you when you get back.
Yeah, I think the ego can get in the way when these guys have been gone for a long time and they get back and kind of can't come to terms with being getting squished or getting tapped out by people who wouldn't normally do that to them. So it's kind of, I think it leads to that all or nothing mentality, because they're afraid if they can come to grips with it more if they've completely laid off training and come back and that happens, versus maybe doing the once or twice a week and having it happen.
The other way that ego can hugely affect your training, I mean, on the one hand, you need ego, but on the other hand, if you're slow to tap on something that can seriously hurt you, you can put your training back by months, if not years, and quite possibly force an early retirement from jiu-jitsu. I mean, I can think of lots of guys running around with neck injuries who can say exactly where it was and against who it was.
Yep.
Where they got that neck injury from. I mean, my neck has been, I've been struggling with it. It's improving because of a couple things that I'm doing, but I can remember the cervical from, the stalks from the closed guard that I thought I could wriggle out of. I know the training room that it was in. Yep. I know the guy that it was against. He wasn't reckless. It was my fault. He kept on applying it. And I thought, I can get out. Pop, pop, pop. And then I yelled.
Yep.
I know. That's my own damn fault, and that's ego.
Yeah, I know a guy the same thing happened to, and it actually fractured his vertebrae.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Is he okay now?
It was years and years ago. He's got to be careful. He's a black belt and runs a school, but he's got to be careful with who he rolls with. That was from a can opener. Guy was inside his guard and did the can opener to open the guard, and that was back before people knew to just open the guard and try to sit up when that happens, and he kept his guard on and refused to tap, and however many neck surgeries later, it's kind of a tough lesson to learn, but it definitely that pride definitely gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the other dangerous locks. I mean, if you don't tap out to a rear naked choke, you're going to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. Worst case scenario, do the funky chicken for everybody. But you're probably not going to be damaged for life. But if you don't tap to something like a wrist lock, you can require multiple surgeries to fix that wrist.
Absolutely.
So anything to do with the neck, any kind of crank, anything, man, just tap. Anything to do with your wrist, man, just tap. Any kind of twisting leg lock, so heel hook or even a toe hold, man, just tap. If you're like a leg lock expert, if you're Eddie Cummings and some dude gets you in a leg lock and it's the Abu Dhabi finals, I understand if you don't.
Yeah.
But it would suck if in the training, in the dojo, in the training hall, you don't tap to that leg lock because you're trying to prove how tough you are. Your knee goes pop, you tear your ACL, and then you don't ever make it to the Abu Dhabi competition, right? I mean,
yeah, then you're out 6 months, and 6 or 8 months have surgery and all of that good stuff.
It'll never be the same.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's definitely a important lesson for people to hopefully learn early in their jiu-jitsu journey. You see a lot of people that happens to, and it's 9 times out of 10, it's something that's easily avoidable through just making sure to tap.
Mm-hmm.
So, Do you have any big projects you're working on right now? Anything new that's going to be coming out or that just recently came out that you'd like to let everybody know about?
Well, I suppose the last thing to come out was the BJJ Formula apps and DVD set. So it's available as an app, as a series of 4 apps, or the DVDs that I did with Rob Bernacki. And those were interesting because they were very, very biomechanically based, right? That was the basis of the whole thing, was taking a look at the underlying principles of jiu-jitsu, things like base, posture, structure, and trying to dissect that and see how it applies from the bottom, from the top. And he's quite a colorful guy. I really like him. Most of the people who've taken a look at that product have also really liked it. But you have to be a little bit on the nerdy side, right? If you just want to learn a bunch of techniques, I wouldn't recommend it.
Did you title it Jiu-Jitsu for Engineers?
We thought about it.
You should have done it, man. Maybe the next one.
Yeah. Then we would have gotten every engineer on the planet.
Exactly.
But actually, a moment arm is defined as this. Oh, God. And I've got a smaller little project about the single leg X guard coming out soon. I've also got a couple other projects coming up that will be filming fairly soon, but they're still top secret. So basically, if you're interested in any of that, what I tell people is, of course I make announcements on social media when this stuff comes out, but it's so easy to miss stuff on social media. I mean, I've got, if you and I are friends, and I figure maybe I catch every 10th, maybe every 20th post that you do, and it's not anything personal. It's just I got tons of incoming messages.
Yeah. You didn't even know I had a podcast, and now you're on. Now you're on it.
Exactly. So the best thing to do for my stuff is to go to my site and sign up for my email newsletter. That keeps you current as to all the new stuff that's coming out. And if you don't like what you get, if you think I'm spamming you, if you signed up and you regret it, there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom and you can be gone, and I won't send you any more stuff. So if you go to grapplearts.com/newsletter, grapplearts.com/book, you can download my beginner's guide to jiu-jitsu that I've gotten some really good feedback on. It takes that whole idea of get good at a couple of techniques from every one of the major positions and goes into the major positions.
Yeah, you have your roadmap for jiu-jitsu on there. I'm looking at that right now. That's great.
Arts.com/book, and there's also an app version of that. But yeah, go and sign up. Give me your email. See if you like the stuff that you get, and if you don't like it, don't worry. You can easily unsubscribe, and that way you'll stay current with all the many balls I've got in the air and this crazy jug thing that's known as running a jiu-jitsu business.
For sure. And on the App Store, if they're looking for apps, can they get those through iTunes? And do you have your apps on Android as well, or is it just on Apple for now?
No, they're Android as well as
perfect,
as well as iOS. Easiest way to find them all is to go to grapplearts.com/apps. Right there's one free one, the roadmap, and there are a couple low-priced ones that are kind of stuff that everybody should know, everybody should have. And then there are a whole bunch more, premium-priced ones that go into very specific aspects of the game. So you might choose just a few of those, or you might choose just one or two of the series in there. For example, the Rob Bernacki BJJ Formula apps, that's a set of 4 apps, right? The first one is just all about the underlying concepts. The next one's about the bottom game and how to use essentially biomechanics to make your bottom game much more effective. In the process there, we go into guard retention and guard attacks and guard sweeps.
Very cool.
The third one is the top position, and the fourth one is the back position. So the back position is the one that's sort of most like a normal, in air quotes, instructional, because it's got here's 6 ways to take the back, here's 5 things to do when the guy tries to escape this way, here's 4 things to do when the guy tries to escape that way. I think it's like a 3-hour app. I think it's the record now for longest app that I've ever produced anyway.
That sounds awesome. And I have a lot of your apps, so I can personally attest to the quality of them. So I definitely encourage people to go check them out. And I need to make sure I go and pick up the most recent ones, because there's always a lot of good stuff I can take away, a lot of good details. And I was going to ask you, I've been bugging you for years to come and do a seminar at my school, and I know you don't do many seminars because you're so busy, but would you make an exception for your old buddy 300 one of these years?
Definitely. One of the main things, honestly, holding me back from doing them for the last 10 years, my kids were young, right? My kids were young and they needed me.
Yeah.
And Dad had a
family's important. Yeah.
So now they're a little bit older. It's slowly giving me a bit of flexibility to do things like that. I really enjoy the traveling. It's not always easy to get the scheduling right, but let's find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, and I'd love to come back up there and visit you again. It's been way too many years.
Yeah, it's crazy. You blink and 10 years go by.
I know. I can tell by all the gray in the side of my beard on both sides here.
the distinguishment being added.
Yeah, I call it my wisdom. I earned every one of those. Well, any final shout outs you want to give before we say goodbye on here?
Man, you know what? I'll make it to my training partners. Like over the years, yes, instructors are incredibly important, but the people that are most responsible for you getting better on a day-to-day basis are your training partners. So, if I go down the list of names, I'm going to miss them for sure. Dennis Kang, Vlado Skrepnik, Adam Ryan, Mo Perry, Chad Scans, Jean-Francois de Rochemont, Richie Yip, especially Richie, my main training partner now, Scotty McKeegan. Man, I'm going to be missing people left, right, and center, and I apologize. I should have had a list. But yeah, if you've ever trained with me, I thank you because it's, hopefully it was good for you, but it was certainly good for me.
That's awesome, man. What a great way to end the podcast. Our 10th podcast now. We're going to be putting out a lot more episodes this year, hopefully. And I just really want to thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time tonight to come on the show. And hey, if you'll have me, I would love to be on your podcast someday.
Let's do it.
All right, my friend. Awesome. Well, listen, let's talk later about that seminar. We'll make it happen.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure.
All right, my friend. You have a good night.
In addition to these podcasts, I also put out a regular newsletter on training. It's very, very jiu-jitsu centered. It's a ton of in-depth information about different aspects, different techniques, different tricks, different tactics, different training methods around jiu-jitsu, ground fighting, no-gi grappling, and even MMA a little bit. So if you go to grapplearts.com/newsletter, you can sign up for free. If you don't like what you get, there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom of every single email you're ever going to get. We'll part as friends, no harm done, you tried it out. But I get a lot of feedback from people saying that they found these emails super useful in their training, even a little bit inspirational. So go to grapplearts.com/newsletter and try it out. It's completely free. It always will be. There's no obligation. It's really easy to leave if you don't like what I give you, all right? Check it out. Take care. Good luck with your training.